Good evening, everybody. It's kind of fun to see a big crowd. My name is Ann Shaughnessy. I am the local history librarian here at Mount Prospect Public Library, and my duties include arranging programs on a variety of topics. And we have a special presenter here tonight, Mr. Steen Metz. He's going to talk about his experiences as a child during the Holocaust and how he has developed a very vibrant life since that time. Please welcome Steen Metz.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me in the back? Terrific. First of all, thank you for coming. I'm absolutely overwhelmed. So many people are here tonight, which is great because as far as I'm concerned, Holocaust in these days, in the turbulent world we live in, is probably more important than ever before. I'm especially pleased to see so many young people, and I'm curious, how many of the young people are students from Prospect Heights High School? So you know my son-in-law, Mr. McDermott? Thank you all for coming. I want to go back about 5 years. I was speaking to a group of 8th graders. After my presentation, the student came up to me and asked me, "Do you feel guilty or lucky being alive?" First of all, I thought it was a very good question, especially coming from an 8th grader. And I would answer today the same way. Maybe I should feel guilty, but I feel very, very lucky. I was among 15,000 children in my camp. Less than 1,200, or less than 10% survived. And I'm one of the lucky ones. In many ways, I feel that I'm representing the 6 million Jews and millions of others that perished during the Holocaust. Why is the Holocaust more important today than ever before? Not only because of the world we live in, but many of you, or most of you, are probably aware of the increase in anti-Semitism. It's on the rise just about everywhere. Increase in vandalism of Jewish property. Increase in denial of the Holocaust. I can never understand how anybody can deny that the Holocaust took place. I just saw the other night, and it was a film taken when General Eisenhower liberated a camp, and he had a vision. He was concerned that people would forget about it or deny it, and they took a film. So if I ever met a denier, which I haven't done, I would certainly show that film. Whenever I speak, I ask each person in the group to be my ambassador. The survivors, we are a dwindling population. As an example, I'm part of the Speakers Bureau in Skokie Museum. A few years ago, we were 50. Today, we are down to 21. So I ask each one of you, be my ambassador, talk to at least 4 people, tell them you know that the Holocaust took place. If I may have the first slide. This is the cover of my book, A Danish Boy in Theresienstadt. Theresienstadt is a German version of the camp. I spent more than 18 months in the camp. It was located in Czechoslovakia. The Czech version of the camp is Theresienstadt. There's only one reason why I wrote the book. I wanted as many people as possible to be aware and know about the Holocaust. if anybody is interested, we have some books, which if you're interested, purchase them after we finish. They're $15 each. On the next slide, I'm showing a map of Denmark. And I'm always interested when I get to this part of the presentation. Do we have any Danes in the audience? Very good. So you were born here? Or you were...
Oh, no. What did you ask? I'm looking.
I'm sorry?
I was born here.
You were born here, but your parents?
Yes.
Okay. So my next question, how many people have been to Denmark? Oh, quite a few. I'm sure you all went to Copenhagen, the capital. Did anybody by any chance visit the greatest city on this earth, which is my hometown, which is up the map, Odense in the middle? Did anybody visit? Okay, maybe next time. I want to go back many, many years. April the 9th, 1940, I was 5 years old. It was a fatal date in Denmark's history. The Nazis invaded Denmark by land, by sea, and by air. There wasn't much of a battle going on for one simple reason. Denmark, along with 20 other countries in Europe, had signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler and the Nazis. Every single one of the 20 countries Hitler invaded. We learned very early on you couldn't trust the man. The battle in Denmark was very short. We were not prepared, as I talked about earlier, and Denmark surrendered after a few hours. When I look back, I continue to be surprised that in Denmark, the first 3 years of the occupation, conditions, I'd refer to them as relatively normal, certainly compared to 20 other countries occupied. In those countries, I would not have been able to go to public school. My father, an attorney, would not have been able to go and practice law. If that isn't the ultimate form of discrimination, I don't know what it is. So why were conditions relatively normal in Denmark compared to all the other countries? A number of reasons. The Danish government were able to continue to govern. They tried to work with the German people up to a point. I believe another major reason was the food, agricultural products, pork, eggs, cheese, and so on. Denmark produced it. We used to export it to Great Britain. It was stopped right away. We had to ship products down to Germany. And on the map, you can see at the bottom of the map, the border between Denmark and Germany. It was kind of ironic that products were shipped down there. We were rationed. We had limited supplies of food when we lived in Denmark. I mentioned that the Danish government continued to govern. On the next slide, you will see that the Danish king, he continued to rule. This was most unusual. Most other kings escaped to Great Britain or as far away as Norway. What I particularly like about this picture is the king. He would be on his horse every single morning in support of the Danish people. He's looking straight forward. He doesn't want to have anything to do with the Nazis. They saluted him. He ignored it on purpose. On the next picture, I'm going to show a young guy, young fellow. If anybody recognizes him, maybe I haven't changed as much as I thought I had. But there's a much more important reason for sharing the picture with you. I was on vacation with my family, my father and mother. I continue to be surprised that we were able to go on vacation. Denmark was occupied. The Nazi soldiers were marching up and down the street. They were literally on every street corner. I saw them up close. I would bicycle to and from school. I lived just outside my hometown, and everybody in Denmark, whether you go to work or whether you go to school, they bicycle. And I saw them, and they frightened me. I didn't like the look of them. But I have to tell you, they never harmed me. They never hurt me. On the next picture, I'm showing my little family, my mother, my father, and myself. If we can go back to the map, please. Thank you. Conditions in Denmark changed drastically late summer, early fall of 1943. A lot of young people, students, colleges, universities, they were not very happy that Denmark had surrendered so easily, and they wanted to fight the Germans. They wanted to make it difficult for them. They made homemade bombs. They got weapons from Sweden. You can see Sweden to the east of Denmark. Sweden was a neutral country throughout the Holocaust. They also got help from Great Britain. They would parachute down weapons at night. It was all small groups, 10 to 12. Nothing to do with the government, nothing to do with the military. It was all independent. It was a dangerous mission. They were very, very courageous. Their major mission was to prevent products, not only food products, but any other products that the Germans forced Denmark to ship down to Germany. They were actually so successful that the German commandant went to the Prime Minister in Denmark, gave him an ultimatum: this has to stop. You have to arrest the young people, and you have to sentence them to death. There was no way the Danish government would agree to do that. They resigned, and administration took over, and that became the beginning of what we refer to as the final solution, the roundup of the Danish Jews. Most of the Danish Jews, well over 90%, lived in the northeastern part of Denmark and Copenhagen. Something very unusual happened in Denmark. A diplomat, a leading German diplomat, found out about the arrest date, late September, early October 1943, leaked the word to the Jewish congregation in Copenhagen. As a result, a number of non-Jewish people stood up for the thought were right. I like to use the word upstanders as opposed to being a bystander. There were too many bystanders standing by, looking in the other direction and not doing anything. As a result, 7,500 Jewish people managed to escape to Sweden. The non-Jewish people housed them in their homes. They were hiding in hospitals. They were hiding in lofts in churches. As a matter of fact, a cousin of mine living just north of Copenhagen was with his mother on a loft. So, to summarize, 95% of the Jewish people managed to escape to Sweden. You can see Sweden is very close to Denmark. Most of the people were transported in fishing boats. We lived in the middle of the country. To my knowledge, we had not been alerted. And unfortunately, my family, we were among the 5% that were arrested. It was October 2nd, 1943, Rosh Hashanah, Jewish New Year. I guess the Germans thought they were very smart. They figured all the Jewish families are going to be home on the holidays. Fortunately, as I mentioned before, 95% were on way to Sweden or already in Sweden. And unfortunately, my family was part of the 5%. We lived in an apartment on the 3rd floor. 2 Gestapo officers pounded on our door. My father answered. Both my parents told me later on it was totally unexpected. It was a shock to both of them. We got about 50 minutes to get ready, packing our suitcases. My mother and I were allowed to go down to the ground floor. On the ground floor, there was a baker. He was up early. Bakers are. I knew him very well. I played with his children. He gave my mother a big, big bag of bakery products. Later on, I found out he also offered that he might be able to help us escape. It might have been feasible. We lived in a big apartment complex, and there was a corridor down in the basement. But there was no way my mother could accept that. My father was back in the apartment, and I'm sure he would have been shot on the spot. Can we go forward? One more, please. You see the truck in this picture? To my knowledge, this is the only picture taken of the arrest of the Jewish people. We were transported from my home to this schoolyard in the same truck. There are 60 Jewish people in the schoolyard. We spent a couple of hours there. Later on, we were transferred to the West Coast. On the next picture, you see a cattle car. We spent more than 3 days and 3 nights in this cattle car, very similar to the one you see there. It was pitch black, no windows, no lights. There was one door, just like on this one. It was locked from the outside. I'm often asked, did anybody escape? It was impossible. To my knowledge, nobody escaped. But I did hear about an elderly woman in another cattle car. She committed suicide. The uncertainty was terrible. I was 8 years old at the time and didn't quite understand what was going on. There were 2 other children my age, and we were able to lie on the dirty floor. The adults had to alternate between standing and sitting for well over 3 days and 3 nights. None of us knew what would happen to us. Would we be shot? I think most of us, certainly myself, had never heard of a concentration camp. And you have to keep in mind, in those days, communications were quite different, or completely different, and much, much slower than they are today. I can still see the frightened faces of many of the inmates. We didn't get any food or anything to drink. We shared the bakery products. Other people have brought sandwiches and snacks. I described the atmosphere as being very, very tense. The smell was getting worse and worse. There were no bathroom facilities. We had to use buckets in the corner. We made one stop, got some fresh air, got some water to drink, and eventually, on the next slide, you'll see we arrived in Theresienstadt. I don't think any of us had ever heard that name. It was located in Czechoslovakia, 40 miles north of Prague, 40 miles south of Dresden in Germany. On the next slide, we arrived in the train station. Jewish people, we had to walk about 1.5 miles into camp. At that time, we did not have a station in the camp. As soon as we arrived, we were ordered to empty our pockets. They took all our cash, jewelry, rings, whatever was valuable. My father told me later on that he had been encouraged to bring money, and I'm sure the other Jewish people were the same. I remember a specific incident in the camp. It happened a few weeks after we arrived. Screaming Nazis woke us up. I think it was about past midnight, maybe 1 or 2 o'clock. We had to go to roll call on a muddy field. I think we spent well over 12 hours, nothing to drink, nothing to eat. There were people that were literally dying in front of us. There were people that fainted. Nothing to eat, nothing to drink during that period. We were told, don't touch anybody. You'll be transported to an extermination camp. Eventually, we got back to the barracks. Every person 16 years and older had to perform slave labor. Unfortunately, my father was assigned to a job outside, heavy road work. He was not used to that kind of work. He used to litigate in a courthouse or work in an office. If we can have the next slide showing my father. On top of that, not much energy because we got very little food. As a matter of fact, my father lost about half his body weight. He just couldn't handle it. A young man in his work group told us that my father was tortured, he was whipped, he was kicked. I was not surprised. I'd heard that before. But when it's one's own father, it's quite a different story. Eventually, he was transferred to an infirmary. They had competent doctors, nurses, but they didn't have the medical supplies. And at the young age of 40, having been married to my mother for less than 10 years, my father passed away. He clearly died from starvation. But there was no way the Nazis were going to tell the world that anybody died from starvation. On his death certificate, they listed the reason as being pneumonia. On the next slide, I'm showing an illustration of a loft, very similar to where my father stayed originally, but in different barracks. We were broken into groups, men, women, children, and seniors. I don't know how my mother managed, but she persuaded the authorities that as an 8-year-old, I could stay with her. It was very, very uncommon. She also had to work. She had many different jobs. She worked with a metal mica in a big factory. She also worked as a cleaning lady, cleaning floors in a huge factory. And as a matter of fact, at the end of the day, she was finished, an officer came in and he saw a big bucket with dirty water, looked around and literally kicked the bucket. The dirty water spread all over the place, and my mother had to do the floor again. I can never understand how a human being can treat another human being that way. I was 8 years old. I did some voluntary work, messenger, taking document messages from one office to the other. I tried not to stay too long in any office, because, as I mentioned earlier, they frighten me. I refer to them as their ugly green uniform, and they all had guns. So one day, I finished work. In the afternoon, I was on my way home, or I wouldn't call it home, but I was on my way back to the barrack. I saw a kitchen, and in this kitchen, I saw some big sacks of raw potatoes. I turned around, making sure nobody was watching, put a couple of raw potatoes in my pocket, and my mother and I shared the potato when I got home. Yes, I was stealing. I probably shouldn't do it. And I'll never forget, some years ago, I spoke to an 8th grade group, and they referred to me as the Potato King. I want to talk about food. Unfortunately, it won't take long. At breakfast, substitute coffee, more hot water than coffee. We got about half a loaf of bread to share within the family for the week. At lunch, on the next slide, I call it the soup kitchen. We lined up normally for up to 40, 50 minutes. They called it potato soup. It was boiled water with potato peel, potato skin. Can you imagine eating that kind of soup every single day? I couldn't eat it in the beginning or didn't like it, but my mother said, Steen, if you're going to make it, you better eat it. At least at dinner time, we would get different kinds of soups. I remember beef, barley. And then about once a week, we got supposedly a treat, it was dumpling, a special pasta dish that they eat in Germany. How were we able to survive on those not only meager portion, but very little nutrition? 35,000 inmates passed away, mostly from hunger, like my father, out of a total population over 3 years of about 140,000. I believe the only reason I'm able to share my experiences today with you is the fact that we started getting packages. All nations got packages in the camp. We got packages from Denmark and Sweden. My entire family, except us, were in Sweden at that time. The packages were organized by Red Cross. We got food, first of all, we got vitamins, and we got clothing. So one day, my mother is opening a package, and she doesn't understand why it's so heavy. No clothing, no food, no vitamins. At the bottom of the package, she found 2 bricks. That's why the package was so heavy. Obviously, a guard had taken all the good stuff. And I'm sure that happened a number of times. I was a growing boy. I reached the age of 9. I'd outgrown my shoes. There was no way my mother could buy any shoes. She bartered with a Czech lady. The Czech lady got some Danish food, and my mother got some used shoes. I was very lucky. They fitted me, and I was able to wear them the rest of the time. I'm often asked, what did I do in my spare time when I didn't line up for food and I worked a couple hours in the morning and the afternoon? I played with other children. I especially remember playing with some Czech boys about my age. We had no trouble communicating because I learned the language phonetically. We tried to play soccer. Didn't have a real soccer field, but we had a gravel field. We didn't have a real soccer ball, but the mothers took some old clothing, tied it together, and we tried to kick it around. That was probably the only time I really felt like a 9-year-old boy should. I almost forgot where I was until I looked up and I saw the big brick wall, barbed wire, and watchtower. Then I remembered, unfortunately, that I was still in a concentration camp. Some weeks later, the boys didn't show up, and I didn't like that, and I was wondering what happened to them. The next slide will explain it. You see cattle cars. 85,000 inmates from Theresienstadt were sent to extermination camps like Auschwitz, Birkenau. 6 of the extermination camps were located in Poland for a very practical reason. There were many more Polish Jews than from any other nation. I never saw, you see there a Gestapo officer supervising activities. Very few of the children, very few of the people in the cattle car returned to the camp. On the next slide, I went back to Theresienstadt in 2009. I wanted to do some research. I wanted to see for myself where I lived, where I played soccer. There's a memorial. It was built exactly at the location where a number of children my age formed a human chain, and we got cardboard urns from the crematorium. They had to cremate the dead bodies. They ran out of space in the earth. Eventually, 25,000 urns ended up in the river. It's difficult to see, but the river is behind the trees. On the next slide, sometimes, and it's not true, but Theresienstadt was referred to as a model camp. It was only a model camp on one specific day in June of 1944. Danish administration wanted to see how the Danish Jews were treated. In the beginning, the Nazis didn't want to have anything to do with it. Then they thought it could be good propaganda, and eventually, after 3 cancellations, they arrived in camp. That's why, on that particular day, it was a model camp. Buildings were painted, there was a music pavilion, there was a lawn, there were benches. On top of that, they sent 10,000 frail old people to an extermination camp. They even had the nerve to import 5 healthy children that just arrived, and they didn't look like the rest of us. On top of that, the Danes were transferred to better and bigger quarters. And of course, we went back to the barracks when the delegation had arrived, had left. It was a delegation of Red Cross people from Denmark, Switzerland, and Germany. And they never had an opportunity to see the real camp. The propaganda, unfortunately, worked. The Nazis had a film producer, film it. His reward, he was sent to an extermination camp. The next slide I refer to as Happiness Returns. The white buses came from neutral Sweden. It was arranged by Red Cross. You can see the Red Cross logo, the Swedish flag, on the side of the buses. It was a miracle they were able to get to Theresienstadt all the way from Sweden. It was equally a miracle that they were able to go back to Denmark, Sweden. They didn't lose anybody, which is amazing. The buses were driven by Danish and Swedish drivers. They were truly upstanders. They were courageous, and it was definitely a dangerous mission to be on. I remember we stopped a couple of times, heavy bombardment, and then eventually we passed, on the next slide, you'll see us passing the border between Germany and Denmark. I continue to be amazed to see the many people surrounding the buses. They had gifts for us, flowers, snacks, chocolate, and so on. We were not able or allowed to stay in Denmark. The war and the Holocaust was still going on. When we arrived in Sweden, we were in quarantine for about 8 days. They wanted to make sure that none of us would bring in any illnesses like typhus. After about 8 or 10 days, we left the camp and we reconnected with my family. And I think I mentioned my entire family except ours came from Copenhagen, and they went to Sweden. I'm sorry. We stayed for another few weeks, and then a big day happened on May the 5th, 1945. On the next picture, you'll see the Danish flag. It was flying everywhere. They actually had candles, live candles in the windows. I talked to some Danish friends not too long ago, and they're still flying the flag on May the 5th, and also the candles. But there are two occasions on May the 5th every year. I happen to have my birthday on May the 5th, and on May the 5th, 1945, I was 10 years old. And ever since then, on May the 5th, when the flag went up, I told anybody who would listen, yes, they're celebrating my birthday. Some weeks later, we arrived at my hometown. Our apartment had been rented out. We had nowhere to stay. We stayed with some friends. They helped us get reestablished, food-wise, clothing-wise. There was no official education in any camps. I got some, like other students, some private lessons. I got some private lesson from a teacher from my old school. I was very lucky, that we returned to my hometown as opposed to Copenhagen. My mother was from Copenhagen originally. 2, returning to my old school, meeting my old school friends. I think that helped me in transforming from the terrible life we lived in camp and then the more normal life in Denmark. I went back in 5th grade, graduated from high school some years later. Then I graduated from a commercial college. Then I wanted to see part of the world. I joined a Danish food company. Most of their business was done outside of Denmark. I went to England, Canada, got married in Canada, went to the United States. I continued to work for the Danish food company, but I also worked for some American companies. I wanted the challenge of working for American companies. I've been here since 1962. I retired in 1999. It's hard to imagine that next month it will be 27 years since I retired. And then I compare it to the 18 months, not 18 years in camp. What a contrast. Like most survivors, liberators, we talk very little about what happened in Theresienstadt. This was also the case in my family. Probably talked a little more to my wife. little more again to my 2 daughters, and even more to my 4 granddaughters who have read my book and who have seen my presentation a number of times. I finished the book in 2012. A new edition, which I have here, came out in 2017. That's really when I started opening up, talking about the Holocaust. The very first presentation, which was quite different than today, took place in my grandson's 8th grade. He's 28 years today and is teaching. I had no idea what I was in for. I had no idea whether they would be talking, whether they would be fiddling with their phone. They were very, very engaged. And I talked to many, many students since then, and they've all been very, very engaged. So afterwards, everybody thought it went quite well. And then I heard my grandson's friend saying to him, "Your grandpa was awesome." And when I heard that, that started a new career in education. And it hasn't just been my mission, but it has been my passion to talk to people like yourselves. I'm very lucky. I started keeping record from day one. And it's hard to imagine, but I reached over 900 groups and talked to about 140,000 people, probably more students than anything else. And I hope that I continue to do it for a few more years. In the meantime, I hope, as I mentioned earlier, that you'll be good enough to pass on the message to at least 4 people. I want to finish with a little bit of humor because it's a very gloomy subject I'm talking about. So some years ago, a high school student came up to me and asked me, was there any dating going on in camp? And I said, I'm sure there was. People are human. He knew what my age was in camp, and he asked me, did you do any dating? And I said, I don't know about you, but I didn't date when I was 8 or 9 years old. So my very last slide is my website, if anybody is interested in any more information. And I want to thank you again coming in such a huge crowd. And I want to thank the libraries for putting extra chairs up. And I cannot tell you how I have been looking forward to speaking to you today. And now I'm looking forward to your questions, and I'll try to answer them as well as I can. And personal questions will be fine.
Did your mother survive?
I'm sorry?
Did your mother survive?
She did survive, yes. If anybody else has any question, we have a microphone.
So, question in terms of why you didn't want to talk about it to people. Is it because you thought people wouldn't understand? Was it the fear of having to relive it? And why did some people take that approach?
Just about everybody took that approach. It's difficult to explain. I think in many people's mind, I think that included my mother, she wanted me to forget about it. But you never forget about a thing like that. There are actually Jewish people, survivors to this date. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to have anything to do with Germans. They don't want to have anything to do with Germany. Most liberators feel the same way. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Yes?
How did you end up in Chicago?
How did I end up in Chicago? I worked for the Danish food company in New York, and then I worked for them in Chicago, and then I went back to New York. Then I left the company and I joined Kitchens of Sara Lee. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Sara Lee. And they were located in a suburb of Chicago. And I spent the majority of my life here. We spent more time, and my two daughters were brought up in Deerfield, and we spent well over 20 years there. Then I got a new job on the East Coast, and then eventually, with our grandchildren and our daughters living in the Chicago area, we moved back to Chicago. Thank you. Yes? I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm sorry.
How many languages do you speak, and how did you learn English?
I'm unusual. You hear about the Europeans speaking 5 and 6 languages. I don't. I speak 2. And there was another question after that.
How did you learn English?
How did I?
Learn English.
I learned English at school. It's pretty much the same way as you learn Spanish. I didn't start until 6th grade. I think today they start in 1st grade. But I really learned the language when I spent time in England, and then I married an English person, and that helped me also.
Have you ever gone back to visit the camp?
I'm sorry?
Have you ever gone back to visit the camp? Does it still exist?
How was it to get back to the Theresienstadt? Is that your question?
Like, have you ever gone back?
Like, what
to
is
see
it? What does the camp look like now? Like, we saw your picture with
Yeah.
the memorial. Like, is there anything other than just that?
There's a museum in Theresienstadt. I wanted to go back to do some research for my book. I wanted to see where I played soccer. I wanted to see where we lived in the barrack. It was amazing because I remember Theresienstadt being much smaller. But of course, when I was there were hardly anybody in the camp. When I was in camp, there were upwards of 50,000 people. And when the number exceeded 50,000, people were sent to an extermination camp. Then I was also amazed that the barracks had been converted to apartments. There were 2,000 people living in apartments. It must be like living in a ghost town. And then I spent a great deal of time in the museum. I'm glad you brought it up. Thank you. I may add that my mother was often asked, did she ever go back to Theresienstadt? And she said, no, once was more than enough. And I respect that, but I will go back anytime.
My question, sorry, hi, thank you so very much. My question is, with regards to this, obviously this time period, this experience has been very portrayed throughout the decades through media, and specifically in film in different ways. And you have everything from Mel Brooks to Steven Spielberg doing different portrayals of this experience that are happening. Some are very lighthearted, some are very extremely touching and heartfelt, and there's everything in between. How do you personally feel about the portrayal of this time period? Are there films that resonate with you, films that don't? What are your thoughts on it?
I feel good about it, and I feel especially good that books are continuing to be written. There continue to be videos and films. And as far as I'm concerned, the more we talk about it, the more we broadcast, the better off we are getting people to remember that it happened. Unfortunately, I come across 2 instances where was not correct information. There was a Danish book, and the Danish author mentioned there was nobody in the camp that died from starvation. They died from old age. My father at 40 wasn't exactly old. Also, from the Washington Museum, and they share a lot of books and videos with teachers around the country. They mentioned that there was schooling in Theresienstadt, and I had a lively correspondence with them to tell them what it was really like. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely.
Hi. You had mentioned early in the beginning of your talk that 20 countries signed a non-aggression pact with Germany, and then all 20 of them got invaded. Why did Sweden not get invaded if everybody went over there?
Sweden remained neutral. It was very difficult for the Germans to invade Sweden. They had mountains. I also have to tell you that during the beginning of the World War II, there was some doubt which side Sweden would be on, but they remained neutral. And the Germans bought a lot of iron from Sweden. That is the reasons why Sweden remained neutral.
Are you, when the Holocaust Museum reopens after its remodeling, are you going to go back and speak there?
I don't know if everybody knows, but the Skokie Museum is being renovated and it's been closed for quite some time. It'll reopen in the fall.
Oh, excellent.
And I'm sure I'll go back there, but I try to make more, as I get older, I try and make more presentations to schools and libraries in this area, because it's quite a long trip to go to the library. But I'll be back.
I agreed with that one kid who said, "You are awesome." Thank you.
Thank you.
I love that you have called upon us and the children to be upstanders, and I wonder if you could expound on that a little bit. Maybe give the children, I brought my 4 children here tonight, a sense of the mission that you visualize, that you see as being an upstander.
I think there are a number of ways that the young people and other people can be upstanders. One example would be often there's fights that break out at the schools. If you can break into it and help out or ask for teacher help, I would consider that an upstander. I also think you can be an upstander. Really speak your mind. Whatever is on your mind, whatever thoughts you have, you should speak your mind. It's not easy. There were many upstanders during the Holocaust, and many of them risked their lives, and some of them unfortunately lost their lives. Thank you.
After getting back from the concentration camp, do you feel like you ever felt like a child again and got your childhood back, or did that time stop?
I think your question is about the concentration camp, but I couldn't quite hear the entire.
After coming back, did you ever feel like you were a child again, or did you just feel stuck in that portion of life?
Did I think I was a child again when I came back? Absolutely. But unfortunately, 18 months of my childhood disappeared. What helped me a great deal being a child again was going back to my old school, being with my old friends. I think it would have been a different story if my mother had decided to live in Copenhagen, and I would have been going to a new school. And there were a number, most of the survivors were from Copenhagen because there were more Jewish people there than anywhere else, and that would have been quite different. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
My question is, did your experience with the Holocaust situation impact your faith?
Impacted my health?
Your faith in the...
I'm glad that was brought up. I have to tell you that I was not brought up in the Jewish faith. My mother, my father, and myself were Jews. We will always be Jewish. The reason I wasn't brought up in the Jewish faith, I believe, there was no synagogue, there was no kosher. There were only 4 Jewish families in my hometown. But I do believe if my father had survived, I think he would have found a way of bringing me up in the Jewish faith. I think I would have been bar mitzvah, but with all due respect, it was nothing my mother was particularly interested in, especially not after what happened in Theresienstadt. As far as faith is concerned, I would say it was on shaky grounds, if that is the right expression. Back in 1943, I read a book, Other Survivor, and he was asking where was God at that time when we were arrested and we needed God. But then God came through in April of 1945, and we were liberated. Thank you.
Do you have any survivals that you still like talk with or like still have connection?
Other survivors. Could you stand up? I think I can hear you.
Oh
better.
yeah. Do you have any?
Do I know
stand up.
other survivors? Is that the question?
Yeah. Do you have any
Yeah,
like
I
survivals?
know some survivors in Denmark, but having not lived there for a long time, it's quite seldom we're in touch with each other. But I'm on the Speakers Bureau, which I think I mentioned earlier, in the Skokie Museum, and I met 5 survivors from Theresienstadt. I didn't know any of them in Theresienstadt. I mean, there were 140,000 inmates there. But we get together and we have compared notes. As a matter of fact, the person, she's no longer with us, confirmed a rumor I'd heard. Towards the end of the Holocaust, Hitler told his people, let's make sure we get rid of all the Jews. They were building a crematorium, a gas chamber in Theresienstadt, and I'd heard that, but this person confirmed it. And I think they started building it in April. We were liberated April the 15th. The rest of the camp was liberated May the 8th. And it's very scary to think about it, because if we had been there a couple of months later, we would have ended up in a gas chamber.
How did you find out that your father had passed?
How did I find out about?
That your father had passed?
They told my mother. My mother told me, and she was asked to go to a big building with many, many corpses to identify my father. She had to go to many different rooms. She didn't really know what to do with me, so I was with her. And I saw my father, and I could almost not recognize him because he had lost so much weight.
Any more questions?
In the book, I have the book from another. You talk about lots of books that you have read and are reading, and people. Some were some you liked a lot, some you didn't care for, and about certain documentaries. Do you have any, can you tell us which documentaries you thought were outstanding and well done?
I think Channel 11 had a series some years ago that was very, very convincing, that was very, very good. As far as books are concerned, in addition, of course, to my own, I liked Knight's book, Elie Wiesel's book, Knight, which is used in many, many schools. It's very, very realistic. He's talking about a death march where he lost his father, and it used to be taught in high school. Now there are middle schools that are starting to do it. Then there's also one of my favorite books is what's it called? Number the Stars. And that's basically for 4th and 5th graders. It takes place in Denmark, and that's probably why I like it. But many, many schools use the book Number the Stars.
You ever read Boy in the Striped Pajamas?
I have not read it. I've not seen the film. There's so many books out there. There are still some that I want to read, but I need some space in between reading the books.
One more question for you. So while you were in camp and they were taking kids and families away, do you know where those trains or families were going to? Was it a well-established fact that they were being sent to like Auschwitz and exterminated, or did you not?
I didn't know about it. My mother knew about the transportation. I have a feeling she knew where they would end up. I have to tell you how the people were selected to be on the cattle cars. The Nazis didn't want to have anything to do with selecting them. They wanted other people to do it. There was a number, it's called Elderly Council, consisting of Jews from many different countries, including the rabbi from Denmark. And they would be told by the Nazis, we need 500 women, we need 200 children, and we need 1,000 men. Somehow, they were able to select them. That's like playing God, as far as I'm concerned. They left notes in their barracks at night, and then they got to the train station later on. When I was in camp, and maybe my mother was trying to hide it on purpose, I was not aware of the train station. And apparently there were terrible scenes there. The husbands wanted to be with their wives and vice versa, and they wanted to try and leave the children behind.
Do you consider yourself one of the luckier survivors of like the Holocaust and the concentration camps?
I was looking the other way. Could you just ask again?
Do you consider yourself one of the luckier survivors of the Holocaust and the concentration camps?
Do I consider myself a what?
One of the luckier survivors.
Oh, absolutely. I think I'm very, very lucky. I'm lucky that I survived. I believe 10% or less than 10% of inmates, Jewish people from many different camps, survived. And I'm lucky not only to survive, but being able to open up eventually and then talk about it. And I talked about it since 2012. And I hope to keep busy for the next few years also. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Which school do you go to? Lincoln. Which?
Lincoln Middle School.
Okay.
Hi. Since there are so many kids and children here. Can you talk a little bit about how your classmates treated you when you returned to school? When you went back to school, how did your friends treat you in school?
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
This is my daughter, Anneliese. It's good to be reminded what I didn't talk about. I'm often asked, again tonight apparently, how we were treated. It was unbelievable, the treatment we got. I should start off by telling you there were very few people anti-Semitic in Denmark. I would hate to return to Poland. There were a lot of anti-Semitism there. My mother and father's friends couldn't have been nicer, especially the family that took us in and helped us get re-established. My school teachers helped a great deal. I still remember sitting in a garden with a teacher, and I was there several times. And I don't remember what she taught me, but strawberries have always been my favorite. So I remember having strawberries there. At that time, that was a special treat because you could only get strawberries during the season. They didn't import them. Is that what you're...
And also, the other kids, did they talk to you about what you had gone through? Did they ask you questions?
Most of my schoolmates didn't ask any questions. I was surprised that they didn't. I thought my mother had talked to the principal not to ask Steen any questions. But some years, I was back celebrating my anniversary with school, grammar school from the first 5 years. And I talked to some of them, and they said, no, if you wanted to talk about it, that would be fine. But we didn't want to bring it up. As a matter of fact, when my mother and I were together, I remember she would say, ask her and not me. So she was trying to help forgetting it, but I said before, you never forget it. Thank you. If there are no more questions, thank you so much, and especially coming here in such big numbers. And if anybody is interested in my book, my daughter Anneliese will be up at the table. If any of you want to talk to me or you have any questions, just come up. But I want to thank you for coming out.